Yes, the PS5 is worth it. Not since the PlayStation 3 generation have we seen such a big leap not only in just performance, but in the overall experience of next generation gaming. Now you may have seen all of our videos this year on the rumors and every little bit of information we've gotten on the PS5, but until you have the DualSense in your hand and a 4K HDR TV in front of you, can you really appreciate just how big of a leap the PS5 truly is? It's good. It is really, really good.
This video is sponsored by the new SteelSeries Arctis 7P headset.
It all starts with the DualSense controller. Now I'll be honest with you, last generation I preferred the Xbox One controller. It was more comfortable and it just felt more natural for me to play on, but this time around it is very clear. Sony have taken the lead with the DualSense. Not only is this a nicer controller to use and to hold, but importantly, it gives you an entirely different level of immersion in the game. So first of all, we have Astros Playroom. Now this is a game which comes pre-installed on the PS5, it's free. It's similar to something like Wii Sports in that it's almost a little bit more of a controller demo, but it does an excellent job of showing you why this controller is completely unlike anything you've used in the past. So every little motion inside the controller you can feel. So for example, as I went left to right, I could feel the controller vibrate. The triggers are unique because there's actual real resistance there. Can you see that? That's in software. Look at that, that's crazy. Not only do I have the sound coming from the controller, but the vibration sort of moves back and forth. It's something which is difficult to get a good sense of on video. The way that I feel a vibration for every little step, it is so cool. Now of course, Astros Playroom is certainly a proof of concept to make the DualSense look and feel as absolute best as possible. But it's actually a pretty fun game. The fact that this is included with the PS5, I do think it's more than just a demo. You can definitely spend a few hours having fun in this thing. Now if I have one nitpick with the controller, it is battery life. Especially with a game like Astros Playroom, which really does take advantage of all aspects of the vibration, the triggers and whatnot, it drains battery pretty quickly. I mean, you could be spending something like 5 or 6 hours between charges, which to be fair, it's USB-C, you can easily plug it in. But if you're playing a lot of games that take full advantage of things, you gotta charge your controller a little bit more often than you're probably used to. Now launch games are never the greatest example of what a console is capable of 3, 4, 5 years down the road, but we do have enough titles to at least get a sense of where the PS5 is headed. So I think Spider-Man Miles Morales is probably the most high-profile game that's out, and it does something kind of interestingly. So you actually have two different modes here. You have 4K 30 and 4K 60, quality versus performance. Performance looks good and runs well, and it is certainly a step up over what you have on the PS4, specifically when you look at the load times and how you're able to seamlessly fly through the city without any sort of bottlenecks. What I find a little bit more interesting is the quality mode. This enables all of the bells and whistles, including ray tracing. In fact, actually, Astro's Playroom does a pretty good job of showing you how ray tracing can kind of make the world feel more elaborate and sort of more lived in. So if you look at the way that his visor is naturally reflecting the environment around him, and even his entire body is being colored by this green grass around him, essentially what ray tracing does is it grounds a game in much more of a realistic lighting solution, right? I mean, essentially, what you're seeing here is exactly the way that light works in real life. If you stand next to a bunch of green grass with a ton of light around you and you're a reflective surface, guess what? You're gonna look green. And that does a lot to make games look so much more realistic. He doesn't stand out because he's, all white and blue or whatever. He blends in naturally to the environment. And I think that's just a little taste of what ray tracing can deliver by not necessarily making the graphics higher resolution or anything like that, but just making everything feel more grounded in reality when it comes to playing these next-gen games. Another game I want to give a shout out to is Demon's Souls. Now this is of course a remaster of a PS3 game, but they've done a really good job of not only looking great, I mean you've got stuff like those reflections, you've got the quick load times in fact actually, that's one of the main differences, but what really jumps out to me on this one is the way it takes advantage of the DualSense controller. When playing Spider-Man, it feels like I'm just using a DualShock 4. You get a little bit of rumble, but it's not anything crazy. But Demon's Souls takes it a step farther. Not only do you get a lot of audio from the speaker inside the controller, but the vibration feels much better. Like every step you can kind of feel left versus right as you sort of clash swords. It's nice. Dirt 5 also takes advantage of the DualSense controller. Now it's a little bit early, I'd say that the support is a touch rough, but you do get a little bit of a sense for what things are going to feel like. So for example, the right trigger as you're driving with the throttle, you actually feel a lot more resistance because they've sort of tuned that into the controller. And it's nice that games have that full capability of changing the way that not only you have the resistance, but the rumble, the feel. You've got a lot of the stuff that makes the DualSense feel kind of next gen. Now, especially as more and more racing games are going to take advantage of this, I love the idea that as I sort of jump on the brakes, I can feel like the ABS pulsing or something. We got a little bit of a sense for that with the Xbox One controller, but those impulse triggers were never really implemented, and they certainly don't have the same fidelity in that experience that the DualSense has. So, early days, but you're starting to really kind of see the wheels turn. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is really something that feels next gen in a way that you won't ever notice by watching YouTube gameplay. You notice it when the controller's in your hand and you feel the brakes lock up or you feel the back end come around as you get on the throttle too quickly. It's a unique experience. Now, if you've been eyeing that PS5, you might be interested in the sponsor of today's video, SteelSeries and their brand new Arctis 7P headset. Now, the Arctis 7 was already the best wireless headset in the game, and now the 7P is all about that brand new PS5. So not only does it match and it is super comfortable, but on top of that, it supports all of the audio features of the PS5 with its super low latency 2.4 GHz connection. On top of that, it also has a Discord certified microphone, excellent audio quality, 24 hours of battery life, which is probably more than you want to game at one time. And it does support also the PS4 as well as most devices via the USB-C dongle, which comes included in the box. You've also got full controls built into the headset, and I've got to say this is one of the most comfortable gaming headsets that I have ever worn. So if you want to go check out the Arctis 7P, you can find it at SteelSeries.com or at the link in the description. And of course, huge shout out to SteelSeries for sponsoring my PS5 coverage. Now, the looks of the PS5 might be a little bit polarizing. I will say I like it, although I do think that the digital version looks a little bit nicer, especially when you have it sitting by itself. This sort of disc tray bulge looks a little bit strange, but I think they've done a good job of the overall design, and there are a couple of nice little features. So in addition to 3 USB-A ports, you also have a USB-C port up front, something I wish the Xbox had. You also have things like Wi-Fi 6 built in, where of course you can plug it into Ethernet if you want, but I've seen really good download speeds taking advantage of that Wi-Fi 6 network. And when you put it all together with what you get in the box, you don't really need a lot of extra stuff for it, right? I mean, that stand, like I said, comes included. And while the size is going to be a problem for some people, I generally like a lot of the little hardware details they've done. I mean, if you look really up close to the little bit of texture on the inside, it's a bunch of the PlayStation symbols. I mean, there's just a lot of little Easter eggs that make this thing a little bit of a cut above that PS4 hardware, specifically from the style perspective. Now, on the flip side, especially after we've done the teardown, I have an appreciation for the way they've designed this. So I'm gonna be quiet for a second, okay? You hear anything right now? My microphone is 2 inches away from the exhaust of this console, and it is almost entirely silent. And I'm not just sitting on a menu, right? This game has been running for over 45 minutes now, and the PS5 has not gotten louder in the slightest. That, I think, is a big win for Sony this time around. Because look, the PS4 was a great console, but sort of the noise, maybe not its strongest suit. So while yes, the PS5 is large, it is large for a reason. They've done a lot of work to make sure that this thing runs quiet and cool. It absolutely does that. There's also a side benefit of that, in that the PS5 takes advantage of boost clocks. So essentially, the quieter and specifically the cooler it runs, the better performance you can get. Still might not be quite as powerful as something like the Xbox Series X, but quiet, cool, high performance are all great things in my book, as long as you have a very, very large space to store it. Something else which is really striking about this next generation of consoles is how fast everything is. So I spoke a little bit about this in my Xbox Series X review, but these consoles are just simply really fast at pretty much everything. So from loading games to hopping between menus to even firing up for the first time, they're incredibly snappy. These things are packed to the gills with cutting-edge technology. They've got excellent processors which help with things like moving between apps and downloading games and multitasking. It runs really well, but you also have plenty of memory. You have cutting-edge graphics with literally all of the latest features, including stuff that came out in graphics cards like 5 days ago. You also have an SSD. Now that, I think, is probably going to be one of the most noticeable things just going between the last generation of consoles and the PS5. Everything loads so fast, right? I mean, you start with Astros Playroom, you jump into a level, 2 seconds later, it's loaded. You know, the days of waiting for 3 minutes for your Red Dead 2 save to load up are simply gone. And while, yeah, there's certainly trade-offs there, this is an 825 gigabyte console. Yeah, so out of the box, you have 667 gigabytes free on the PS5. And with only a couple of things installed, I'm down to 490 gigs. That is certainly a downside, right? SSDs are expensive, and the fact is you're simply gonna have less space to work with on these new consoles, and the games are going to be bigger. Now on the PS5 specifically, the hardware actually does support you to upgrade the SSD yourself. So we've actually done an entire teardown, which you can feel free to check out, but it's pretty easy to just slide off the side panel and install an SSD. The problem is, of course, those SSDs are going to be expensive, and those SSDs are also not available yet. Even if you can find one, it actually doesn't support it. You're gonna have to wait for a future firmware update. That being said though, the fact that we have super fast SSD storage really does mean that everything on this PS5 absolutely flies. Now, I don't want to give you the wrong idea. While the PlayStation has a ton of strengths, it is certainly not a perfect console. So when you line it up beside the Xbox Series X, you can see that the Xbox is a little bit more of a technically focused console. So not only does it have more raw graphics performance, but on top of that, the Xbox has a lot of functions and features that just simply are missing on the PS5. So take, for example, the ability to output a 1440p signal. If you have a 1440p gaming monitor, you just simply can't get that resolution out of the PS5, where the Xbox handles it no problem. Same thing goes for things like auto low latency mode and specifically variable refresh rate. You have things like FreeSync built into the Xbox that simply are missing, at least as of right now, on the PS5. Now, none of these things are deal breakers, but the Xbox does a much better job of handling a wide range of displays and giving you a very smooth output. If you plug in your PS5 to a standard 4K TV, this is fine, but all those weird edge cases the Xbox handles much better. Something else I've been missing coming from the Series X is full backwards compatibility. Now, I'll give Sony props. They do finally have PS4 support in the PS5, so you can play most of the games you've purchased over the last few years, but there's no support for the PS1, PS2, or PS3, which is understandable, but when you look at the Xbox side of the house, which is able to play pretty much every Xbox game from the original all the way up to the modern titles on the Xbox Series X, it is a little bit of a miss. I also really find myself missing quick resume on the Xbox. So on the PS5, it works just the way that the PS4 works. So you're playing a game, you want to play another game, it quits it, launches the next title. That's fine, especially with the SSD, it's much quicker. But on the Xbox side, the quick resume built in means that you can actually jump to the last handful of games that you played, and they will load in a couple of seconds to exactly where you were before. It's a feature that, again, sort of in keeping with the theme of these new consoles, is all about getting you into the game as quickly as possible. And it's something that, pretty frankly, I miss coming from the Xbox over to the PS5. But I'm actually going to be doing a much more in-depth comparison between the PS5 and the Xbox. So make sure to subscribe to see my full thoughts. But there are certainly some trade-offs on either side at the moment. At this point, I think it's pretty clear. I personally think the PS5 is worth it. This next generation of gaming adds so many new features with so few compromises, what I think is a pretty reasonable price point. It's hard to go wrong. Now, on top of the PS5, you also do, of course, have the PS5 Digital Edition, which I didn't really talk about in this video, but it's pretty much the exact same thing, but it's $100 cheaper and you don't have the optical disc drive. And on the Xbox side of the camp, they actually do match up pretty well, right? I think PS5 and Xbox Series X are much closer than the PS4 and Xbox One ever were. And if you really want to go on the budget side of things, the little baby Xbox Series S, while it's not as powerful, does offer a lot of these same next-gen benefits. But regardless, if you can't get your hands on a PS5 right now, I wouldn't stress on it too much. While yes, the console is good right now, there still aren't a ton of games, and there are a lot of features that either need to be updated or added in firmware over the next year or so. So if it takes you a little while to get your hands on one, I don't think you're missing out on that much. But when you do, that next gen is very, very real. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. And until my next clickbait PS5 video, I will see you then.